Welcome back to the deep dive. Our mission, as always, is sharp and singular. We take dense, really critical source material today. It's a massive research document, and we try to synthesize the most important knowledge, those surprising insights, directly for you. It's about getting you deeply informed faster.
And today, we're diving deep into excerpts from a really significant document. It's titled The Image of the Digital Future of Russia, Formation and Representation. And this isn't just another tech report. It's actually a profound sociological look at how, public consciousness, the media, and official policy are all grappling with defining and directing a future that's just marked by this radical digital acceleration.
I like that framing, grappling. It really sets the stakes because the authors say right at the start this whole study is needed because of high social turbulence. I mean, when things move this fast and there's so much uncertainty, you really do need a map.
Exactly.
So our job today, kind of like instructional guides, is to show you exactly how this image of the digital future is being put together, both in like official plans and just in people's minds.
Precisely. Yeah. We're going to walk you through the document structure, section by section. Think of it as a sociological roadmap. It explores that gap, that tension between what people hope for and what they really fear about all this digital change.
And the foundation here is solid, right? Not just opinions.
Well, absolutely critical to understand the scale here. It's not just theory. They've combined theoretical work with a digital humanities approach. That means analyzing, get this, 86,000 documents using text mining.
Wow, 86,000.
Yeah. And they paired that with a big sociological poll, 1,600 people. So we get hard data on what the public actually thinks and feels, not just speculation.
Okay, foundation's laid. Let's start where they start. If we're talking about the digital future, we first need to pin down this idea of the image of the future itself. What does that actually mean in this context? Hashtag 1. Theoretical and methodological foundations, source section 1. Hashtag 1.1, defining the image of the future.
Right, the theoretical bedrock. So in sociology, this image of the future isn't just, guessing what's next. It's defined as a kind of mental anticipation of change. And crucially, it has a vital social function.
A social function? How so?
Well, think about the sociologist Fred Pollack. He famously argued that a society's belief in a positive future is basically a prerequisite for its development. If that mental image, that collective vision, gets corrupted or turns negative, then the drive for progress, for collective action, it just stagnates.
Right, so it's about collective motivation, social cohesion almost. And the source makes a useful distinction here, drawing on thinkers like Landier, Pollack, Singer. It clarifies what kind of image we're talking about. How do they break that down?
Yeah, they split it into two key types, which is helpful. First, there's the anticipated image. Yep. This is the subjective side. It's your gut reaction, your personal fears, maybe anxieties about your job, privacy, what you feel is coming down the line, spontaneous, emotional.
Okay, the gut feeling. And the second type?
The second is the projected image. This is the rational, planned-out version. Think government 5-year plans, official strategies, the goals and targets that are consciously designed and promoted.
Ah, so the head versus the heart, almost.
Kind of. And a lot of the tension in this document, and frankly in society right now, comes from trying to reconcile that often messy, anxious, anticipated image with the neat, rational, projected image pushed by institutions.
And throwing the word digital into the mix pours fuel on that fire, doesn't it? The source says the digital future means extreme speed, more global connection, but also, crucially, way more uncertainty. This leads to what they call the black box effect.
Yes, that black box idea is fundamental. We really need to grasp it because it gets to the heart of public anxiety. Imagine a literal black box. You see what goes in, you see what comes out, but the process inside, it's opaque, it's unintelligible, sometimes even to the experts, just because of the sheer complexity, the automation, the speed involved.
So like, say, how a social media feed decides what I see.
Exactly. Or how a loan application gets approved or denied by an algorithm, or how critical infrastructure is managed. When these core societal systems operate inside that kind of opaque black box, social uncertainty naturally spikes because people feel like they're losing visibility, understanding, and maybe even control. Agency.
It's that feeling that the system's running itself and maybe nobody's really steering the ship. Which connects right into the next point about societal resilience. Hashtag 1.2 digitalization and societal resilience.
It really does. And just to give some context for this digitalization push, the document points to the 2022 IMD World Digital Competitiveness Ranking. Russia ranked 36th globally then.
Okay, 36th. What goes into that ranking?
It's a pretty holistic look. They assess three main things. Knowledge, basically, the capacity to learn and build new tech. technology, the infrastructure and readiness to actually use digital tools, and future readiness, how prepared the country is for upcoming digital shifts.
So 36 suggests, well, room to improve, but also a base to build on. And the timing of this study is interesting because the source highlights how the COVID-19 pandemic was like this massive, unplanned global experiment in digitalization.
Absolutely. A huge catalyst. The pandemic showed two things at once, kind of paradoxically. On one hand, it proved undeniably how vital digitalization is for keeping society functioning. Remote work, online education, telehealth, all that. Social
Right,
resilience.
we all live that.
But on the other hand, it massively accelerated the uncertainties. It exposed vulnerabilities and deepened society's dependence on these very digital systems, the ones that often feel like black boxes. So IT isn't just part of life anymore. It's woven into the very fabric of social consciousness. It's foundational.
And this is where it gets interesting generationally. The source mentions research by people like Rasa, Lahertu, Cook, looking at how younger people see the technological future. What's changing there? Are the digital natives more optimistic?
Well, it's more nuanced than just optimism. What's fascinating is this documented shift away from what you might call naive techno-determinism.
Yeah.
The old newer, faster, better is always good idea.
Okay.
Younger generations seem to be moving beyond just general enthusiasm for purely technical progress. Their hopes and fears about the future are more critical and often tied to social outcomes rather than just the tech itself. They want tech to help with things like equality, climate change, maybe better human connection, not just deliver faster processors.
So they're thinking more about the purpose, prioritizing the why over the what.
Exactly. It suggests a real desire to make technology serve a higher, maybe more humanitarian purpose. They've grown up seeing both the promise and the potential pitfalls.
Which sounds like they're keenly aware of the risks. Hashtag tag 1.3 digital risks and algorithmic opacity.
That awareness leads us straight into the next section, the specific risks that come with this rapid shift. If the anticipated image is where the fears live, these are the dangers fueling those fears. The study groups them into three main buckets.
Let's break those down. They seem crucial for understanding public anxiety.
Okay, first, you've got the straightforward technological risks. Things like system crashes, software bugs, hardware failures. Pretty standard, but the impact gets bigger as systems become more integrated.
Makes sense. Second, the economic risks.
Yeah, this one hits close to home for many. The displacement of labor, mass unemployment fears due to automation. It's a very concrete, immediate threat people feel.
And the third category, perhaps the most pervasive in terms of that black box anxiety, the social risks.
This is where it gets really thorny. These are the risks tied directly to that feeling of lost control. Massive data breaches, pervasive surveillance, a general sense that your personal information and choices aren't really yours anymore. And this ties perfectly into a concept the source brings up, Eli Pariser's filter bubble.
Right, the filter bubble. Most of us have a sense of what that is, but how does the source frame its risk in this digital society context?
They frame it as a serious social risk. Because these personalized algorithms, they curate our reality. They limit exposure to diverse viewpoints by feeding us what we already like or agree with. This creates these like echo chambers or epistemic enclosures is the academic term.
So it reinforces biases?
Precisely. Instead of challenging our views, it confirms them. And that constant reinforcement is a huge threat to informed public debate, critical thinking, things essential for a healthy democracy. Right? It makes it harder to even agree on a shared reality, let alone a shared projected image for the future.
And if the filter bubble controls what we see, the opacity of the algorithms controls how decisions are made about us. The document mentions the need for digital sociology here, citing researchers like Kitchen.
Yes, and Kitchen's work highlights this collision course between the sheer power of big data processing and our traditional ways of ensuring ethical oversight. The problem is, we often don't know how these algorithms reach their conclusions.
The black box again.
Exactly. If the logic behind a decision, whether it's granting a loan, recommending medical treatment, or even predicting crime hotspots, is hidden deep inside complex code, how do we check it for bias? How do we ensure fairness? How do we hold it accountable? The sociological challenge is immense. How do you force transparency and ethical checks onto systems that were primarily built for speed and efficiency, not necessarily for fairness or accountability? Hashtag 2.2. Presentation of key images in media space. Source section 2.
Okay, so we've got the theory, the anxieties, the black box problem. Now, section 2 shifts gears. It looks at how these ideas actually show up in the real world, specifically in the media. This is where we move from the theoretical to the empirical using that digital humanities approach you mentioned.
Right. This part is all about mapping the media landscape itself. And that methodology, text mining on 86,000 texts, about 2.5 million characters worth of data, is key. It lets the researchers actually quantify what's being talked about, how often, and even the sentiment around it. It reveals patterns in public discourse you just couldn't see otherwise.
Before we get to the findings, they give some context on the Russian internet scene. Looks like Russian language content online dipped slightly in web share between 2023 and 2024.
Yeah, a slight dip noted, from 5.1% to 4.3%. Interesting context, but the really crucial bit here is identifying where these conversations are happening. The authors point to the Big 10 platforms based on user reach back in 2023. You've got VK leading with 82% reach, then Google at 81.3%, YouTube at 78.3%, and WhatsApp close behind at 78.2%.
So these platforms are the main conduits.
Absolutely. If you want to understand how the image of the digital future is being shaped, you have to look at the content flowing through these dominant channels. They're the main arenas where the public's anticipated image meets or clashes with the official projected image. Hashtag tag 2.2 frequency of technological concepts.
Right, let's get into that content analysis. This is where we see what's actually capturing public attention. They looked at how often specific digital tech concepts were mentioned in that massive media sample. What did they find? What's top of mind?
The results here are, well, they're incredibly skewed. It shows a really significant distortion in public focus. Artificial intelligence, AI, just completely dominates the conversation. It clocked up 198,600 mentions in the sample, overwhelmingly dominant.
Wow, nearly 200,000 for AI alone. How does that stack up against other important technologies?
It basically dwarfs everything else. The next most mentioned concepts were big data, with about 35,200 mentions, and blockchain, around 32,500. So AI is being discussed almost 6 times more often than the next closest concepts.
6 times. That's not just a gap. It's like AI is sucking all the oxygen out of the room. What's the implication of that huge focus on AI?
It points to a real narrowness in the public discourse. AI becomes the symbol, the shorthand for the entire digital future. It captures the imagination, the headlines, often the fear or the hype.
Like a synecdoche, as you said earlier.
Exactly. People are focused on this one, often quite abstract concept, the shiny object. But they seem to be largely ignoring other critical foundational technologies. Things like the Internet of Things, IoT, or quantum computing, even robotics and drones, they register way lower mentions.
So the conversation lacks depth.
It seems so.
Yeah.
The public discussion isn't really grappling with the full ecosystem of changes. It's hyper-focused on AI, leaving a lot of the underlying infrastructure and other transformative technologies kind of in the shadows. Hashtag tag 2.3 sentiment and intensity analysis.
Okay, so AI dominates the mentions, but what's the feeling around it? Did the study look at sentiment, whether the mentions are positive, negative, neutral? Are people excited about this AI-centric future?
They did, and it's interesting. Generally, the sentiment around AI itself is leaning positive or neutral. It dominates in terms of positive and neutral connotation intensity. So it's seen largely as a symbol of progress, technological breakthrough, efficiency.
That aligns with the idea that people trust the capability, right?
Yes, it suggests that the belief in the potential of the technology, the technical optimism, is quite high, at least as reflected in the media.
But here's the paradox we talked about earlier, isn't it? While AI itself gets positive or neutral press, what about concepts related to how it's used by institutions?
Ah, yes. This is the crucial counterpoint. The analysis found that the concepts digital society and digital government actually showed significant negative association, high negative connotation intensity.
So love the tech, fear the system.
That's a good way to put it. It's the public's anticipated image, the fears about control, surveillance pushing back hard against the projected image of, say, a more efficient digital state. People seem excited by the tool, AI, but deeply wary of how institutions might wield it, especially when it comes to governance and social structure.
The researchers boiled all this down into 4 main images emerging from the media landscape based on the sentiment and intensity. Can we walk through those? They seem like useful summaries of the narratives out there.
Absolutely. These 4 images capture the dominant media narratives. First, the digital economy. This one is overwhelmingly positive. It's all about breakthrough tech, efficiency gains, new markets, economic growth, the future of wealth story.
Okay, that sounds familiar.
Second, the digital lifestyle. Also highly positive, but more personal. This focuses on convenience, easy access to services, better quality of life through apps, online shopping, streaming, etc. The individual benefits fast delivery, easy banking.
Got it. What about the others?
Third, the digital government. This one's much more mixed. There's talk of efficiency, modernization, cutting red tape.
Yep.
That is heavily tied to anxieties about bureaucracy, systems not working, institutional opacity, maybe even incompetence.
And the last one.
Fourth, the digital society. This is the most negatively charged image. It's strongly associated with all those risks we discussed: control, surveillance, data vulnerability, loss of privacy, maybe even social fragmentation.
So the media picture is pretty clear. Digital stuff is great for your wallet and making life easier day to day. But when it comes to how society as a whole is organized or governed digitally, there's a lot more apprehension. That sets a fascinating stage for looking at what people actually said in the survey. #Tag3. Dominant images in public consciousness. Source section 3. Right, let's pivot from the media analysis to the public consciousness itself, the results from that 1,600-person sociological survey. And the first big finding here is this really striking gap, this contradiction almost, between how people feel about their own future versus the country's future.
Yes, this divergence is, I think, one of the most insightful takeaways in the whole study. It tells you a lot about the underlying social mood. When they ask people about their personal future, for themselves and their immediate family, a clear majority, 60%, said they expected a good future.
Mm.
That shows a decent level of personal hope, maybe a sense of agency.
60% for the personal view. Okay. But what happens when they zoom out, look at the bigger picture?
That optimism just plummets. When asked about the future for Russia as a whole, only 33% expected a good future. That's a massive gap, almost half the level of personal optimism.
Wow, 60 versus 33. What does that huge difference tell us?
It highlights this really key psychological dynamic. People seem to feel they have some control over their own lives, their immediate environment, their family's well-being. They can navigate their personal world. But there's this profound skepticism, maybe even pessimism, about the larger social, economic, or political direction. It's often seen as a warning sign when that micro-optimism so drastically outpaces macro-optimism.
It suggests people are willing to adapt and use tech for themselves, but they're really hesitant about the big systemic changes it might bring. So they generally support tech, but what are the specific fears driving that macro-level caution? #Tag 3.2, attitudes towards technology and digital threats.
Well, first, let's be clear. The survey confirms people aren't anti-technology overall. Support for developing future tech is strong. 76% either fully or partially support it. So they see the potential, aligning with that positive digital economy media image.
They believe in the possibility, but the fears are very targeted. The study used something called R-scores to measure which threats felt most urgent or generated the most anxiety. Can you explain what a high R-score means here for listeners?
Sure. Think of the R-score as basically measuring the heat around a particular topic. A score near 0 means low concern, people aren't really worried about it. A high positive score, though, indicates significant anxiety, a high perceived threat level. And the results here are crystal clear about where the public's real worries lie.
Okay, so what's keeping people up at night, according to the R-scores?
The number one fear, by a noticeable margin, is the loss of control over personal data. That scored R 0.49. Right behind it is the fear of algorithmic control and manipulation with R 0.44.
Personal data and algorithmic control. That directly mirrors the black box anxiety and the negative sentiment around digital society we saw in the media analysis.
Exactly. It translates that abstract fear into a very personal perceived threat. People were worried about being watched, tracked, maybe having decisions made about them by systems they don't understand or trust, potentially being manipulated.
And what's fascinating is what people are not seemingly worried about based on the R-score.
Right. The scores for some of the more traditional or perhaps abstract fears were incredibly low, almost negligible. Concern about the digital divide, the gap between tech haves and have-nots, was R.02. Fear about losing national identity due to globalization or technology. Even lower, R8apps 0.08.
So negative scores even, what does that tell us?
It strongly suggests that people's anxieties are focused on immediate personal threats to their agency and privacy things that affect them directly. Abstract societal shifts or even inequality issues like the digital divide seem much less pressing in their minds compared to the fear of being personally monitored or controlled. The fear is visceral, internal.
That's a really critical point for anyone designing policy. Addressing the digital divide is important, but if you ignore the data control anxiety, you're missing the public's core concern. Did they look at age differences in these fears? Are younger people, the digital natives, less worried?
You might think so, but it's actually the opposite. And this is really interesting. The younger groups, Generation Z, born roughly late 90s onwards, and Generation Y, millennials, consistently showed more concern about these negative social consequences than the older generations.
Really? The ones who grew up with it are more worried. Why might that be?
Well, the thinking is perhaps they've seen the downsides more clearly. They've lived with social media surveillance, data leaks, targeted advertising, algorithmic bias. It's not theoretical for them. For example, 24% of Gen Z expressed concern about technological unemployment, and 31% of Gen Y were worried about manipulation and control via algorithms.
So their lived experience makes them more skeptical, not less.
It seems that way. The generation most immersed in the technology is also the most acutely aware of, and arguably skeptical about, its potential harms. Their anticipated image is definitely shaped by experience. Hashtag 3.3 societal priorities and institutional trust.
Okay, so we have cautious optimists, particularly younger ones, who fear losing control over their data and being manipulated. Given that, what do they ultimately want society to prioritize as we navigate this digital transformation? What does their ideal future look like?
When asked directly about the desired characteristics for the future, the top answers speak volumes about the need for stability amidst all this change. The number one wish was for peace, 40%, closely followed by confidence in the future, 38%.
Peace and confidence, so security and predictability are paramount.
Exactly. It suggests people want this rapid technological change, this digitalization to happen within a framework that feels incredibly stable and secure. They want the disruption managed, anchored.
Which leads to the crucial question, who do they trust to manage it, to build those stable foundations? The figures on institutional trust here are really quite striking.
They really are, and they reveal a fascinating paradox. The highest levels of confidence are placed in the people perceived as the pure knowledge creators and technical experts. IT specialists top the list with 71% confidence, followed by scientists and educators at 63%.
71% for IT specialists, that's very high trust. But how does that compare to trust in, say, the government?
It's significantly higher. Confidence in traditional institutions like the government and the military sits much lower, around a moderate 32%.
Wait a minute, let's pause on that. The public trusts IT specialists the most, 71%, but their biggest fear is algorithmic control and manipulation, R0.44, which is, well, it's implemented by IT specialists and the systems they build. How do we reconcile that?
It's a brilliant paradox, isn't it? It seems to reveal a very clear distinction in the public mind between trusting someone's technical ability versus trusting their governance or ethical compass. People seem to believe the IT sector has the skills to build amazing, powerful digital systems, the projected image. But they lack faith that the right rules, oversight, or ethical frameworks are in place to prevent those systems from being misused or getting out of control the negative anticipated image.
Trust the builder, fear the lack of blueprints or safety inspectors?
That's a great analogy. They trust the how, but worry deeply about the why and who controls it. And this explains why their ultimate priorities for the digital future itself circle back to those anchors of stability.
What were those top priorities again?
When asked specifically about priorities for the digital future, the highest was actually maintaining a strong state, 40%. But right alongside that, almost tied, was achieving high standards of living, 43%.
Strong state and high living standards.
Yes. It seems people want the benefits of digitalization, the efficiency, the economic growth driven by those trusted IT specialists, but only if those benefits reinforce traditional pillars of security, a strong, stable government, and tangible economic well-being for citizens. This is how they see those social fears being managed. Hashtag Shackhead 4, Images of the Digital Future in Historical and Modern Context. Source Section 4.
Okay, this brings us to Section 4, where the study tries to put all these contemporary opinions and anxieties into a broader historical and sociological context. It helps explain why our modern view of the future feels so complex and uncertain compared to, say, a century ago. Hashtag 4.1 Historical Framework of Future Images.
Exactly. We loop back briefly to that sociologist Fred Pollack and his idea that a positive future image fuels development. The document uses this to contrast with the past. Think about the 19th century, as the historian J.B. Bury pointed out. Back then, there was this pervasive belief in linear, almost inevitable progress. Technology was generally seen as an unalloyed good, guaranteed to make life better.
Right, the march of progress narrative. That definitely feels different from today.
Totally different. That simple linear view has largely shattered. Today, the future, especially the digital future, is perceived as highly uncertain, incredibly complex, and potentially quite dangerous. That sense is amplified by the speed of digital change, the way data flows globally, and that persistent black box effect of automated systems we keep mentioning.
So the old model just doesn't fit anymore.
No. The modern challenge isn't just to passively accept whatever progress comes along. It's about consciously forming and articulating a desirable projected image, one that specifically addresses and tries to mitigate those deep-seated public anxieties. Hashtag 4.2, 4 ideal typical images of the future, survey-based typology.
So, drawing on all the survey data, the hopes, fears, priorities, the researchers identified 4 distinct ideal types or models of the future that exist in the public consciousness. These represent different ways people are trying to synthesize their beliefs about technology's role and feasibility. Let's start with the one that sounds most like pure tech enthusiasm. Image 1.
Right, image 1, technological optimism. This view is really driven by that high belief in technical feasibility we saw. The core idea is basically that technology, AI, robotics, big data will eventually solve most, if not all, major problems. People really believe the tech can be developed. Feasibility scores were like 99% for specific advancements.
But it's maybe a bit cold?
It can be perceived that way. It often focuses heavily on efficiency, capability, maybe economic outcomes, sometimes less on the human or social dimension. Then you have the direct opposite.
Image 2.
Image 2. Technological pessimism. This is the flip side, the shadow. It focuses exclusively on the threats. Technology leading to greater social divides, mass unemployment, loss of individuality, maybe even humans becoming redundant or controlled by machines. This resonates directly with those high R scores for fear of algorithmic control.
Okay, so those are the extremes. But images 3 and 4 seem to capture where the majority of public sentiment actually lands, trying to find a middle ground, a way to blend the tech with stability. Tell us about image 3, the modernizing traditional one.
This one is really interesting and culturally quite specific, perhaps. It envisions a future that combines cutting-edge technology and digital modernization with, simultaneously, a revival or strengthening of traditional values, strong morality, maybe spiritual development.
So embedding the new tech within old values.
Essentially, yes. It's about domesticating the disruption, placing strong cultural and ethical guardrails around technology so it serves established norms rather than overturning them.
And how appealing do people find this particular blend?
Very appealing. Around 60% of the survey respondents found this image attractive. It really points to a widespread desire. Yes, we want the benefits of new technology, but we need it anchored in things we know and value. We want digital efficiency, but integrated into a strong state and a moral framework we recognize.
That's a powerful finding. What about image 4, the socio-humanitarian image? How does that differ?
Image 4 shares the desire to control tech, but its focus is slightly different. Here, technology is seen strictly as a tool to serve human-centric goals. The emphasis is all on improving quality of life, better education, healthcare, solving social problems like poverty or environmental issues, enhancing human potential. Tech is subordinate to human well-being.
And the appeal for that one?
Also, very strong. Around 55% found it appealing. It's another vision where technology is clearly a means, not an end in itself.
So putting it all together, the public isn't really buying into either the techno-utopia or the techno-dystopia.
Not primarily, no. The dominant pull is strongly towards these blended images 3 and 4. People seem to be saying they want modernization, they want the technological advancements, but only if that advancement is firmly guided by and ultimately serves robust social, ethical, and humanitarian values. They want the projected image to be fundamentally human-centric, not just efficient. Hashtag check 5. Scenarios models for forming the digital future image. Source section 5.
Which leads us perfectly into the final section of the document. If we understand the public's preferred direction, these value-anchored futures, how do you actually plan strategically to get there? Section 5 talks about scenario planning, referencing Peter Schwartz's work.
Right. Schwartz is well known for framing scenarios not as predictions, but as tools. They're structured ways to think about the future, especially under conditions of high uncertainty like we have with digitalization. They help map out potential risks and opportunities associated with different paths.
And given that tension we've seen throughout between the public's fears, anticipated image, and the official goals, projected image, using scenarios seems crucial for finding a path that doesn't increase social turbulence.
Exactly. It's about navigating carefully. The source lays out a fundamental philosophical choice that shapes these scenarios, based on 2 opposing views of what drives change. Different kinds of determinism. This really defines the potential trajectories.
What are those 2 opposing views?
Okay, the first path is rooted in technological determinism. This is the view that technology itself is the main engine of change. It's autonomous, powerful, maybe even inevitable, and society's job is basically just to adapt to whatever the tech dictates.
The resistance is futile. approach.
Yeah, kinda, yeah. And the document warns that following this path uncritically risks leading to some pretty undesirable outcomes. They mentioned either digital totalitarianism, where technology becomes the primary tool for control, or maybe a technocratic paradise, which might be perfectly efficient and orderly, but potentially lacking soul, culture, or deep human values.
Okay, that's the tech first path. What's the alternative, the one that seems to align more with what the public wants? Images 3 and 4.
The alternative is framed as social or humanitarian determinism. In this view, human goals, societal values, cultural resilience, these are primary. Technology is seen as merely a tool, a means that must be directed to serve those predefined human ends.
So humans are in the driver's seat, tech is the vehicle.
Precisely. And this path, according to the document, points towards more desirable futures, like a humanitarian digital society, aligning with Image 4, or that appealing traditional modernization, aligning with Image 3. The core policy challenge then becomes, how do you consciously choose this social humanitarian path and actually implement the governance structures needed to keep technology subordinate to human values? Hashtag 5.2 foresight and youth involvement.
If that's the goal, the socially determined path the document emphasizes something called participatory foresight, mentioning work by Nikolova. Why is getting the public actively involved in developing these future scenarios so important?
Well, given everything we've seen, the public's deep anxieties about control and surveillance, the relatively low trust in government to manage the transition compared to tech experts' participatory foresight becomes essential for building legitimacy and buy-in.
So it's about trust building.
Largely, yes. It ensures that the scenarios and the strategies based on them aren't just handed down from a small group of technical or political elites. They need to emerge from a broader public consensus, reflecting shared values and addressing common fears. It's a way to force some transparency onto that black box process of future shaping.
And the study specifically calls out the voice of the digital youth, people aged 18 to 30. They're the ones who will inherit this future most fully. What are their key demands for how this digital future should be governed?
Their demands really crystallize the need for accountability and control mechanisms that directly push back against those fears of manipulation and data misuse. The core requirements coming from this younger generation include things like, first, much greater transparency and open data policies. They want to see what's going on.
Makes sense.
Second, significantly increase education in digital literacy programs so everyone can understand and navigate this world. Third, guaranteed ways for the public to participate in making decisions about digital systems and policies.
Giving people a real say.
Exactly. And fourth, very strong legally enforced protection of personal boundaries and privacy. These demands line up perfectly with tackling those high anxiety R-scores we talked about. They want the state to be effective, maybe even strong in providing stability, but not at the cost of their individual freedom and data security.
So, wrapping this all together, the success of any national digital strategy seems to boil down to bridging that gap between technical capability, which people seem to trust, and ethical governance, which they seem to fear is lacking.
That's the crux of it. The document's ultimate conclusion suggests that building a successful, socially accepted digital future hinges on consciously integrating the public's expressed interests, that desire for a strong state and high living standards, anchored in strong social and humanitarian values, directly into the official, projected digital strategy. If policy ignores those deep-seated fears, those value preferences bubbling up in the anticipated image, the strategy is likely to fail because it won't build the social trust needed for people to come along willingly. Hashtag outro.
Well, this has been a really deep exploration. We've journeyed through how a society, or at least this study's view of Russian society, perceives, fears, and maybe hopes for its digital future. We saw that huge disconnect, the media buzzing about AI's potential, while the public worries intensely about control and data loss.
Yeah, and that striking psychological split between personal hope, that 60% believing in a good future for themselves, and national skepticism, only 33% for the country. That gap really feels like a measure of underlying social tension or fragility.
Absolutely. And the consistent rejection of pure technological determinism in favor of futures where tech serves human values.
Exactly. The document powerfully reveals this societal challenge. How do you domesticate incredibly powerful technology? The public seems to believe the tech can be built corrective. They have that 71% confidence in IT specialists' ability, but they overwhelmingly want that capability guided by strong social, cultural, maybe even traditional values, like in those modernizing traditional or socio-humanitarian images.
So the future image can't just be anticipated. It has to be actively, consciously formed.
Precisely. It needs to be a deliberately humane, accountable, projected image. Otherwise, the fear-driven, chaotic, anticipated image, the anxiety about the black box, could easily dominate and stall progress.
That core tension, trust the skill, fear, the lack of governance, that really resonates as the key takeaway.
It really is. And it leaves us, and you listening, with a final thought to chew on. Given that IT specialists and scientists hold the highest public confidence, yet algorithmic control is the deepest public fear. The real test of the digital future isn't just about technological prowess, it's about governance design. So the provocative question, building on this source, is this. How can society translate that high trust and technical skill into genuine confidence and ethical control? How do we ensure that the black box of automated decision-making is consistently pried open, scrutinized, and held accountable, perhaps specifically by those technical experts whom the public already trusts? That seems to be the central puzzle.